Welcome back, beautiful and amazing human beings, and yeah, let's talk about North Korea. Because now it's not a matter of if there will be a war with North Korea, but when. And in this important video, I not only wanted to talk about the latest news with North Korea, but I also wanted to get into some of the propaganda and misinformation about North Korea, the larger geopolitical implications for the United States actually attacking North Korea, and how Russia and China are standing in the way of that, which may not only soon cause an economic war, but even a bigger war than just with North Korea. Now, just moments ago, we are learning that North Korea has tested its most powerful nuclear bomb yet, an advanced hydrogen bomb that could be sat on top of an intercontinental ballistic missile, whose recent test sent tremors all across the region, being 10 times more powerful than last year's tests. This latest nuclear test was so powerful, it reportedly shook buildings in Russia and China, caused a magnitude 6.3 earthquake, and as many people speculate, could be used as a super powerful EMP against the United States. Now, of course, this is a very defiant, extremely aggressive move by North Korea that, of course, directly defies the United States and Donald Trump, and has garnered international condemnation even by fellow countries like China and Russia, which is a very significant move by Russia and China, and we will get to their significance later in this video. Now, moving forward, and in no way taking away the seriousness of North Korea's latest actions, I wanted to talk about the other side, because there has been a lot of disinformation and propaganda on the U.S. mainstream media regarding North Korea, and at this very important time, it's critical for us to understand both sides of the story here. The majority of the mainstream media's supposed military experts and analysts actually do work for the military-industrial complex and military contractors that do profit off war. There's a very clear agenda, and we have seen many blatant lies by the US mainstream media to demonize North Korea that were factually untrue, as uncovered by this very interesting documentary called The Haircut, which I will link in the description below. And one of the stories that they uncovered was a complete lie and propaganda used against you to demonize North Korea was the news report that supposedly Kim Jong-un made it a law that everyone has to have his hair cut. And we've seen that news reported all over the US mainstream media.
New hairstyle that's getting a lot of attention.
Men now have to wear their hair just like their leader.
Under orders to get a Kim Jong-un haircut.
Have to cut their hair a la Kim Jong-un's distinctive hairstyle.
To ask pedestrians, can we oon you?
How many haircuts did you get today? Oon. You've been unified.
Understand how unbelievably weird North Korea is.
We're just going to take a little off the top.
Justin Bieber. Anne Hathaway.
With a ridiculous haircut and nuclear arms.
They're not going to blow me up.
But what the US mainstream media forgot to tell you was that this was an absolute lie coming from one news source with an anonymous source. The whole story was fabricated, pushed by a supposed private non-profit international broadcasting corporation called Radio Free Asia, which, surprise, 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 was started by the CIA. And just off this one news organization, off of their one anonymous source, they ran the headlines all across the country. And it's not just about haircuts in North Korea. That same CIA-funded news organizations ran headlines that North Korea banned sarcasm, that 120 hungry dogs killed Kim Jong-un's uncle, and the list goes on and on and on. Now, it's important to note here the United States tested 1,032 nuclear weapons at a crazy cost not only to the environment, but also its fellow citizens. Now, North Korea looks like a prime country for the United States to invade. Reportedly, they have an estimated $6 trillion in mineral resources, don't have a central bank like many countries the United States invaded before them, and they have a very young, unstable leader in his early 30s, who of course is very unpredictable and rash with his actions. Now understand, this is not a black and white issue, whether you're for North Korea or not for North Korea. All I'm trying to do here is explain the situation as honestly as I can, and explain this very confusing mess as simply as I can. And this big international mess doesn't only include the United States and North Korea, but mainly China and Russia. As we've seen former Secretary of State Condoleezza Rice, by the way, she's the woman who helped start a war based on imaginary weapons of mass destruction in Iraq that killed around 1 million people. She is coming out of the woodwork right now and saying that Donald Trump has a right to threaten China over North Korea. And it's not just old neoconservatives coming out of the woodwork to push for more war with North Korea. It's also the mainstream media that, of course, praises Donald Trump, gives him a boost up every time he commits a very strong military action. Now, Donald Trump has come out after these latest nuclear tests by North Korea, and he has said, quote, that appeasement will not work. And of course, he's issuing very harsh statements about this, but those statements cannot be be met with action, mainly because of China, and also because of the grave implications if he would act on those words. Because there's no way the United States could launch a limited attack on North Korea, because the North Koreans could strike back, and that would risk not only 30,000 US troops, but also 25 million people who live very close to North Korea in Seoul, South Korea. And with many artillery bases on the border of North Korea and South Korea, the situation would be disastrous if there was only a, quote, limited strike on North Korea. Now, the second factor here, China, is even more of a dangerous situation that the United States is putting itself in. As we've seen Donald Trump tweet today that, quote, the United States is considering, in addition to other options, stopping all trade with any country doing business with North Korea. And trust me here, he's not just saying any country, he's specifically talking about Russia and China, which many people claim, according to rogue agents and middlemen in that country, help fund North Korea's nuclear program. And with Donald Trump saying he would stop all trade with these countries, we are pretty much facing an all-out trade war with China, which has been brewing for a very long time, and with the deteriorating bilateral diplomatic efforts and failing to work on an agreement about North Korea, look very likely and would be disastrous for both countries. Now, one of the reasons why China has been steadfast in not wanting a US invasion of North Korea is because the Chinese view North Korea as a buffer state. The Chinese and Americans have already been bunting heads over the man-made South Asian Sea military bases that China is building, and if North Korea falls, they do not want to see a united South Korea that, of course, has a very strong alliance to the United States right at its border. Russia also has very similar geopolitical aspirations, and we've seen Russia and China work together in order to protect these bigger geopolitical interests, and they have done so with very significant military moves. As we've seen Russia and China mobilize their militaries, and not only surround the US military in the region, but also follow them. And these actions are only escalating as Vladimir Putin, the president of Russia, just sent bombers over the Korean Peninsula moments ago. China has also launched war games as a warning to the United States and North Korea over the previous confrontations these countries had just a few days ago. And their message is very clear. They do not want a war in North Korea. And just days ago issued a statement calling for a mutual freeze on North Korea's nuclear program and US-South Korean military maneuvers in the region. China has intervened many times in between North Korea and the United States, and have even offered a deal which the United States keeps declining, which would stop North Korea's nuclear program only if the United States and South Korea stop doing military drills in the region, practicing and doing dry run bombing campaigns of North Korea. The North Koreans have agreed to this deal. The United States keeps declining it. Donald Trump personally said no to this deal 2 times, and it could be in part because of the lack of trust the United States has with the Chinese, but it is clear that these military drills that continue the practice dry run bombing of North Korea only help worsen the situation. Now, of course, 2 wrongs do not make a right, but I think the bigger picture here that a lot of people are missing is the fact that this conflict is not just one-sided, and that there's very little hope that Kim Jong-un will ever get rid of his nuclear program, since he even speaks himself of the lessons learned from Muammar Gaddafi and Saddam Hussein before him, which creates a very uncomfortable situation for the United States, which is continuing to face off against China and Russia. And it's not only happening with North Korea, but it also happened with Iran and Syria, which the Chinese and Russians have aligned themselves with. Factor this in with some of the economic war that has been happening with the US petrodollar versus moves that the Chinese have been making with their gold-backed yuan, and Russia's economic trade move against the US petrodollar. It's clear that this is a lot bigger of a standoff than just the US versus North Koreans, and hopefully with the clear facts and getting this video out there, we could understand the full picture of what's happening and prevent any rash actions. Let me know if you agree or disagree in the comment section below, and of course, thank you guys from the bottom of my heart for allowing me to do this job for you, since we are primarily and only sponsored by you and your donations only. You have no idea how important you guys are to me. I love you guys. Stay tuned for more important content here on youtube.com/WeAreChange.